Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth, and Roy, I'm really looking forward to this show here because it brings me feeling pretty close to home that I'm dealing with Midwestern type of sports. So we want to welcome our special guest, Kent Sterling, sportscaster for Indiana. And Kent, welcome to the Sports Exchange.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it.
Well, we're glad to have you. And of course, Rick Curti, welcome back, Mr. Opinion.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
And Steve Balestrieri, Mr. Patriot. See, we got a lot of misters in this thing, Mr. Patriot.
Yeah, I've actually been out of the loop all day today because, as you know, my other job I write for military affairs and politics. And, you know, with that Russian cruiser being sunk in Ukraine today, I haven't checked out any of my sports stuff today at all. So hopefully nothing big happened today and I didn't miss anything.
Well, you know what? We're going to end the day off here on a very lighthearted note. You can't get any better than Midwestern sports. And, you know, I got to tell you, Kent, in front of a national audience, okay, he was nice enough to give me a birthday greeting one day, and it stayed in my head and never left. So, you know, we're turning that birthday greeting into a appearance here. And, Kent, we are so delighted to have you. So let's get ready to have a little bit of fun, all right?
Absolutely.
And now I'm wearing this Indianapolis Colts hat that I bought, by the way. I don't know if it was from one of those convenience stores. They happen to have one there. And I figured, why not have an Indianapolis Colts? You never know when I'm going to need it. So I don't know what it cost me, $10 or $12, but it was worth every dime I spent because now I'm putting it to good use. So now Uncle Sam gets into the equation as well.
And I bought this South Florida shirt for $9. So I got that going.
Oh, trading places, I don't even know. But all right. So since we have a Patriot and a Colt here, there's no better chance to go ahead and talk about a few things pertaining to those two organizations. First of all, Matt Ryan is now the new quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts. Carson Wentz, who I, by the way, Kent, did see against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and Jacksonville is a former quarterback for the Colts. Tell me how all of that went down.
Well, there was a disconnect between Wentz and the Colts from Jump Street. From the point where Wentz decided that he didn't want to get vaccinated and as a $28 million starting quarterback was putting his position and his ability to play at risk because of NFL protocols. It's not really about the vaccine, whether to vax or whether not to vax, but the NFL protocols were in place so that if a guy tested positive, all of a sudden he's got a 2-week rip. And the Colts weren't in a position to survive that kind of thing. And so Jim Irsay took that as kind of an abdication of duty. And because of that, there was like this chasm between the team and between Wentz. And the locker room really never fell in love with him. And so there was just this kind of weird friction. It was never a fit with the community. He's just kind of an interesting guy, we'll put it that way. And Philadelphia fans told me over and over again on my YouTube channel, they commented, look, here's what you're going to see. You're going to see a guy with all the talent in the world, and he's going to utilize it enough to tantalize you and then get you beat with it. And that's exactly what he did. And so the Colts, it was made clear in a meeting the night after when they got home from Jacksonville, they got off the plane, went to the Colts complex, met with owner Jim Irsay, and Jim said, okay, we're done with all of this. Carson Wentz is a goner. You guys figure it out. I want to contend. We can't contend with that guy. So you guys get in an office, figure out where we go from here.
Well, the amazing part about it is, and I think we all know this by now, that Frank Reich was his coach with the Eagles. And if anybody could have fixed this guy, I would have think Frank Reich could have. So that to me is mind-boggling. And Frank Reich has gone out there and said, you know, I went out on a limb for this guy. So how do you think Frank Reich feels about the way this whole situation played out? I don't think that Jim Irsay and Chris Ballard would, you know, put the onus on Frank Reich. But, you know, that's an interesting situation when somebody goes to bat for you and all of a sudden it doesn't work out.
The limb is a little bit skinnier underneath Frank Reich because of the Carson Wentz thing. And so that's kind of the way it works. As a coach or as a GM, you're defined by your mistakes, and those mistakes kind of pile up over time. This is a big mistake. This was trust exercised and trust lost with Frank Reich, And that's not a good thing. Trust is everything with Jim Irsay and Chris Ballard. And Frank Reich was unable to deliver upon his promise. And Carson Wentz and Frank Reich, they came together over scripture. And it was just kind of like this thing. I'm good with people who are devoted religiously, but you've got to be devoted to your employer, and you've got to be devoted to winning. And if you're not devoted to that in equal measure, things get out of kilter, and they sure did with Carson Wentz.
Well, how much of an insult to injury was it that the Philadelphia Eagles made the playoffs and the Indianapolis Colts did not make the playoffs, considering the draft capital that was involved, and that the Colts had to settle for a lesser draft capital when they sent them to Washington? So you have a little bit of a three-layer here, Kent.
Although they did get some draft capital back, and they got more than I thought that they were going to be able to get back, given that Washington decided to eat the entirety of the final year of that contract or the final year of the guarantee. Otherwise, the Colts were just going to cut him. And I thought the teams were going to wait for the Colts to cut and then go ahead and sign Carson Wentz. That's not the way it went down. The Colts actually got some stuff back. So good work by Ballard there. And then employing just a third-round pick to go get, to me, a significant upgrade over Wentz in Matty Ice from Atlanta, just giving up that third rounder. I thought that was good work.
Yeah, but for the Eagles to get in the playoffs and the Colts not getting in the playoffs, I don't know. For some reason, if I were Indianapolis, that to me would be a bitter pill to swallow.
And don't forget that the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles is Nick Sirianni, who came over to Philadelphia last offseason, having been the offensive coordinator for the Colts under Frank Reich.
What do you want to add, Steve and Rick?
Go ahead, Rick.
I like the Matt Ryan. The Carson Wentz one, I thought that was interesting. I always thought he was very talented and just he's so injury prone. And I think you said they weren't in love with him, and I think when they lost to Jacksonville, of all teams to lose to, who were a complete train wreck under Urban Meyer, I think that was kind of like the final straw for them. So, to me, getting Matt Ryan is a total upgrade. Total pro. I mean, he's just you never hear anything bad about him. Just I was very impressed with his press conference, and to get to trade him and for a third round pick. I mean, to me that's a steal because I think he's still got like good 3-4 years left, and he seems rejuvenated. He seems like a total leader, and I think Indianapolis did well trading Wentz away and getting some draft picks back.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
If all you did was watch the press conference with Matt Ryan being introduced as a Colt and then Wentz being introduced as a commander,
Wentz, like a hot dog,
like a hot dog with mustard and ketchup, and then Ryan with the sharp blue blazer, the blue tie, the white shirt,
nice haircut, chiseled jawline. I mean, he looked like a movie star.
So Ken, what was the feeling last year around Indy? Because that, to me, seemed like a playoff team all season long, and there hasn't been a lot of disappointment there.
The evolution of that season, they started 1-5, and people were kind of pulling their hair out, but understood that Wentz, having had both ankles sprained, like on the same play as Aaron Donald kind of crushed his lower body, you sort of understood it. And then Wentz comes back, and all of a sudden they get hot, and they win. I think they won 8 out of 9, and all of a sudden they're like a 98% likely team to go to the playoffs. And people are like, "Hey, Carson Wentz, all right, we can live with that this year, and then next year maybe, and then if things get a little bit sideways, you can move on." Because this community, this is a really interesting city. Like I've lived in Chicago, I've lived in St. Louis. Grew up in Chicago. Indianapolis is a really nice town filled with people who value nothing more than a man's word. That's it. There's a really small town. And if you violate trust around here, it's over. And with Carson Wentz, that trust was just never established. That grippiness between him and the community just never kind of developed. He never evolved into sort of a Hoosier. And Indiana people paid attention to that. And so when they wound up losing to the Raiders here in week 17, and then Jacksonville, certainly in week 18, it was over for Jim Irsay as far as Carson Wentz was concerned, but it was really over with this community and Colts fandom with Carson Wentz as well.
Oh, no. Yeah, because, Scott mentioned, the old Patriots-Colts rivalry. I mean, when you think back to Peyton Manning, Peyton Manning was Indianapolis. I mean, the community rallied around him, and that when the Colts got Wentz, I never saw that ever happening with him. I mean, not to compare him with Peyton Manning, obviously that's unfair, but at the same time, you pay attention to what happened in Philadelphia, and I found it interesting that they paid so much for him, and I didn't think he was ever going to attain that, like you said, that Hoosierness.
I'll tell you a story about Peyton Manning. It's kind of a quick story, but I think it speaks to who he is and how he fit here, and it makes me sound like a big deal. So it kind of checks both boxes for me. I worked for MS Communications back in through 2010. After Peyton Manning's rookie season, we had this grand opening of the world headquarters of MS Communications, beautiful broadcast facility on Monument Circle in downtown Indianapolis. And part of the celebration was a concert that I think about 250,000 people attended. It was Kool and the Gang and Rod Stewart. Excuse me. And so everybody wanted to go. And I was backstage. Ken Dilger, Adam Meadows, and Peyton Manning, they're in the crowd. And I knew Ken because Ken did work for the station. And he's like, hey, can we come back there? So I grabbed the security guy and I said, these three guys can come on back. So I got Peyton Manning backstage. And Manning is standing there, and they had all kinds of beer and stuff backstage, and it drank Miller Lights all night long, and was dancing just like a big goof out in front of God and everybody. And I was like, there is nobody. He may be from New Orleans and may have gone to school at Tennessee, but there is nobody in this city right now more Hoosier than Peyton Manning is. And in Peyton Manning doing that showed a confidence in who he is that I don't think Carson Wentz has ever really exposed. And if it exists, we haven't seen it.
Well, amazingly enough, when you talk about the quarterback stability with the Colts, you went from Manning to Andrew Luck, and I really felt bad for Andrew Luck. If there was a retirement that bothered me a lot in Indianapolis, it's that one. And again, I'm from the Detroit area. I've seen some premature retirements before for losing reasons, which I'm not going to get into tonight because the focus is on Indiana. But I hated to see Andrew Luck leave earlier. Because he, to me, personified a great transition from Manning to Luck and a class act. And unfortunately, you guys have had quite a few quarterbacks since then. And I really, truly do hope that Matt Ryan stabilizes the ship there and he's able to take the Colts to where they need to go. Because if there's any quarterback who could provide a sense of veteran presence and calmness, I don't think there's any question in my mind, and I've covered the NFL for a lot of years, than Matt Ryan. He's definitely going to benefit from a change of scenery if any quarterback ever would.
If he's unable to stabilize it, I don't think there's no more, I don't know, from a personality perspective, I think he's the most stable quarterback in the NFL. There's nothing flighty about him. He's not going to go off on people like, Baker Mayfield has. If you put Matt Ryan on Hard Knocks, and Matt Ryan's been on Hard Knocks, they did a Falcons version. There was nothing interesting about Matt Ryan. He is stable to the point of comatose. If he doesn't stabilize the position with the Colts, I don't think anybody can.
Interesting. Well, so we talk about the Colts and the Patriots rivalry. Great segue, Ken. Then again, I'm talking to a broadcaster anyways. But you talk about the Brady-Manning rivalry. I mean, if anybody can talk about it more than anyone, Steve Balestrieri can appreciate it because he lived it on the other end and you on your end. But let's talk about how interesting that rivalry was between Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. Everybody wanted to see it. It was much must-watch TV. Every national television network put him in prime time. But explain the rivalry. Steve, explain it on your end, and then Kent's going to do it. I'm going to just step back a little, watch you guys talk about this rivalry a little bit.
Well, I think what made it so interesting was Brady and Manning were actually friends off the field. They had a great deal of respect for one another. And although they didn't play against each other on the field, they were competing all the time. And you could sense that. But, there was never any sound bites where, in today's world, so many guys talk smack about each other. Neither one of those guys ever got into that. There was always that respect level, and everyone was competing. But on the field, it was, all the way. And I love those games. I actually got to be at a couple of those Colts games when Manning was quarterbacking the Colts against the Patriots in Foxborough. And I went to another one when Manning was with the Broncos. And the way, like I said, we saw Brady all the time, every day at practice. But seeing Manning come in, it was completely different. And the way he carried himself, and he would have fun with it because we were down on the field before a game, and some of the fans were jaw-jacking with him, and he was giving it right back to him. But then, then he turned right around, and there was a kid wearing like a Manning jersey. So he went right over, and he signed the kid's jersey, talked to the kid's dad, and then they shook hands. They took a quick selfie. And then he put his helmet back on, went back to warming up. And then everybody in the crowd was just like, that's really cool. So then it was like, okay, yeah, you're cool for about 5 minutes until the game starts. But I love those games. Those to me that was football at its best. You have two of the best guys who ever played the position going against one another. And those games always went right down to the wire. I loved them.
I was on the field for the game in 2007 at the RCA Dome, where the Colts were up by 10 in the fourth. And so I'm down on the field, and what you can see on the field that you can't see from the stands is so interesting to me. And two things really struck me, and that was that the Colts defense was gassed. They'd been on the field too much, and Brady had been on the field too long and made him work too hard. And then Wes Welker's feet were so quick. He was so explosive out of cuts. I thought there's no way the Colts can stop these guys. It's just impossible. And I went from being a guy who absolutely loathed Bill Belichick, admired but also loathed Tom Brady, and really loathed Wes Welker, to being a guy who really kind of appreciated and respected all of them because of the way they went about their business. And so that rivalry sort of turned for me on that day. And then in 2009 at Lucas Oil Stadium, there was the game where Melvin Bullitt,
the 4th and 2 game.
Yeah, the 4th and 2 game, where we were at the game, and I never do this, but I started when he went for it on 4th and 2 at his own 29, I started jumping up and down and screaming, he blinked, Belichick blinked. And I'd never seen Belichick do that before. And I love the way he explained it in the postgame, saying that they knew they couldn't stop Manning. And so their best chance was to go for it on 4th and 2 and try to go get it. And they were unable to. Falk was unable to because Bullitt made a really, really good play. Those were just special games. And that was like rivalries in the NFL. They're terrific now. And you've got kind of the Chiefs and the Bills a little bit, and kind of the Rams and maybe Packers in the NFC, and the Cowboys, whatever, in the NFC East, which drives me nuts. They get all the play on ESPN, and it's not a very good division, at least in my mind. Mm-hmm. But those were real. Like, those teams respected each other, but they tried to beat the hell out of each other. Yeah. It was really fun every single year, and you knew that in the AFC playoffs, you were going to wind up seeing those two teams either early or late, and one of them was going to get to the Super Bowl.
Well, I got to tell you,
I remember one game, I think it was opening week of season. where the Patriots and Colts were just going at it, went right down to the wire, and Vanderjagt missed the field goal at the end of the game. And I remember Peyton wasn't too happy with the Vanderjagt's comments and all that, where he called him the idiot kicker.
Yeah, our stupid drunken kicker got drunk. Yeah, and I was like,
But
wow,
that
that's the
was
most
tremendous
Peyton Manning I've heard
football
talk smack to anybody. But that was funny.
Yeah, I remember that. That's true. I mean, for Manning to go after a kicker or liquor down, I mean, that's against Peyton's personality to take a shot unless somebody
It was funny.
It's safe to say that Adam Vinatieri, though, made his way to Indianapolis, and that didn't work out so well either. I do want to add one thing about great quarterbacks. Since you guys appreciated the Brady-Manning connection, I happened to be at the Super Bowl when Manning took on Drew Brees. I was covering that Super Bowl and got credentialed for it. Yeah, Kent, I was there. Okay. Great game. Enjoyed the whole time experience. I've actually been to 4 Super Bowl games, but I've been a part of 7. But to me, but when you talk about great quarterback rivalries, I don't think there's any question, in my opinion, in its day, that Manning and Brady undoubtedly is one of the best rivalries of all time. And I say one of the best. I know there might be other people that disagree, but I don't know. I know you're not one of them.
I think that Peyton Manning was the best quarterback I ever saw. I think that maybe Tom Brady is the best competitor. And so the difference to me is this. I used to sit in the end zone at Lucas Oil Stadium for the 3 seasons that Manning played there. And it was like watching Madden, right? You had that kind of end zone view. And so you could see how the defense was aligned. You could see how the offense was deployed. And you could kind of see where the hole is going to be and maybe how, a route tree might develop where Manning's going to have an open receiver. And by God, every time he hit the right guy. I never saw Peyton Manning make a bad read. I saw him miss a couple of throws where he had a guy open, literally a couple, but never make a bad read. He was so smart and so well prepared, and I never, ever saw a defense get over on him. And Belichick, you talked to Manning, and Belichick was the guy who threw the whole kitchen sink at Manning. And Manning has always said that at the end of those games against Belichick, he was absolutely mentally exhausted because Belichick made it so difficult to diagnose what he was running.
Well, let me ask you, aren't you guys glad in Indianapolis that Bill Polian made the right choice with Manning over Ryan Leaf? Can you only imagine what that would have looked like?
How about Jeff George? God. Come on. Don't forget about Jeff George.
I think that was a pretty good move, taking Peyton over Ryan Leaf.
Yeah,
a little bit.
It's probably one of those thank God moments. Okay, this is not FCC, so we can say thank God here on the air that at least you were able to get Manning instead of Ryan Leaf. God help me. All right, one other thing.
What though? You talk to fans in Indianapolis, and they're not gonna talk about that with Bill Polian. They're gonna talk about the season you alluded to where they lost to the Saints in that Super Bowl because Hank Baskett couldn't field an onside kick, and because Bill Polian pulled the plug on that undefeated season in the game against the Jets in Week 16, that 15th game of the season, where the Colts have a lead. They're going to win that game. And he had Jim Caldwell pull the starters, and all of a sudden you got disaster. And fans in Indianapolis and the Colts themselves understood exactly. Like if you're a part, like you guys don't know, being down in South Florida, right. You know how much money Mercury Morris and Larry Zonka and Bob Greasy and those guys have made because of that 72 season. The Colts had their opportunity, and Polian decided willfully to pull the plug on it. Nobody here has forgotten that.
Oh, I can imagine. All right, one other thing I want to talk about pertaining to the rivalry. I know we have a lot of things I want to get to, but we had to start off strong with football, and I'm glad we didn't get that out of the way because we have a lot of things. Thankfully, you have a little time to cover all of them because I got a lot of good stuff lining your way. But Deflategate, I know that's one of the things that tends to get mentioned between these two franchises again. Steve, I know you're smiling here from all the way from here to Alaska. Let's talk a little Deflategate, and then we're going to go on to some other stuff.
Well, I mean, to me, it was way, way overblown. I mean, it was a one-sided football game. And honestly, there's no competitive advantage for deflating a football. As we all, when you were a kid, the hardest football to try to throw was a deflated one. I mean, the harder they are, the easier they are to throw. But I mean, I just thought, and it wasn't the Colts so much, it was the NFL. The NFL went crazy with that. And, because there was a lot of ex-Jets in the NFL front office at that time. And I'm trying to remember who it was, but after they measured the footballs at halftime, he was an ex-Jet front office guy, and he literally ran to the Patriots sideline and said, "We got you this time." So what does that tell you? But, to me, it was way overblown. Actually, the Patriots, when they reinflated the footballs at halftime, I thought they played better in the second half than they did in the first. And that was just one of those games that got away from, Andrew Luck. We thought it was going to be a really close AFC Championship game. It turned into a blowout.
It was interesting the way that whole thing went down with Ryan Grigson talking to Bob Kravitz. Bob Kravitz around here is kind of the guy, worked at the Indianapolis Star at the time. Now he works at the Athletic. And Kravitz ran the story, and Patriots fans still blame Kravitz for the story ever happening and lambasted him on Twitter regularly. And Kravitz didn't do anything but do a really good job of reporting the facts. And as far as an advantage, the only advantage that I can see statistically is that once teams got a control of their offensive footballs, all of a sudden the Patriots' incidents of fumbles went from like a league average, normal, straight to the floor. Like they never fumbled again. Once they got control of their balls, they never put it on the ground. And so I don't know whether there's kind of a cause and effect there or not. I would assume there is, but I think that at least statistically appears to be the advantage that they gained.
Interesting. Okay, well, let's go on to the Indiana Pacers. We talk about a guy who's cool in Matt Ryan, okay? But I'll tell you what, I work with Rick Carlisle, and I know he was your coach before, had some success. I know I believe he's part of the coach of the Malice at the Palace. We're not going to get into that.
He was.
But I love Rick Carlisle, one of the most even-keeled guys I've ever seen. And I learned a lot from his cool demeanor that have actually rubbed off on me covering the Pistons for a while. But the question that I have for you, Kent, is he the right coach for the Indiana Pacers right now? I know he won with them the first time around, had a good run with Dallas, and now he comes to a situation which appears to be a rebuild. And I know that, but there's no question, in my opinion, that Rick Carlisle didn't forget how to coach at all, because I think his record, in fact, I'll even take it a step further, Kent. I think when the Pistons hired Larry Brown over Carlisle could have won that championship, but they opted to go with Larry Brown. That's just my opinion. But my question to you is Rick Carlisle the right coach for the Indiana Pacers, Kent?
I think it depends on where he is in his life. And I think once he reaches a certain age, you become a little bit more circumspect and not as hardcore focused. Some guys do, like Belichick still wants to win more than anything in the world. But then you've got guys who kind of become circumspect. And I don't know if at the age of 61 or 62, Rick is as pot committed to winning basketball games as he was when he was 42. When he was here in 2004 through 2007. I'm not sure. Because of COVID, we're not around the guys at the level that we had been covering the team and talking to Nate McMillan, or we never got to talk to Nate Bjorkgren, but I don't think we missed anything. And before that, Frank Vogel. Loved Frank Vogel. What a great guy. So we've gotten to spend a little bit of time with him, and I've interviewed Rick a couple of times. He is exceptionally smart, and he knows exactly what this team is and kind of what it needs. And it's in the nascent stages of building a roster that maybe can contend. The Pacers haven't had a draft pick in the top 9 since 1989, since they took George McCloud. They've kind of done it with bailing wire and trying to figure out how to keep guys here, which has become more difficult over time. It used to be that this was a place that people wanted to play because you can be famous in Indianapolis. The people will recognize you, but they'll leave you alone. I saw in 2010, 2011, early 2011, I saw Peyton Manning, Anthony Gonzalez, Blair White, and Curtis Painter at a McAllister's Deli, of all places, on the north side of Indianapolis. They're sitting at a booth. Nobody bothered him. Nobody walked up, asked for an autograph, asked for a selfie, nothing. And that's the way Indianapolis works. These guys can go to the mall. You can go out to dinner. I saw Adam Vinatieri at a gas station waiting in line to pay for his gas. And so I was in the Colts locker room all the time. And so I said, hey, how you doing? He said, hey, how you doing? And I saw him the next day. I was like, what are you doing in a gas station? Could you have done that in Boston? And he's like, absolutely not. Like, you couldn't go to the mall. You couldn't go out to dinner with your family. You were not harassed, but you were lauded.
Inundated, yeah.
Right. Here, not so much. So people used to love to play here. It's become kind of a different animal as people try to become the biggest brand that they can and kind of put on the back burner winning and that kind of thing. But the Pacers are really in that process of trying to put together a roster in a very different way. And Kevin Pritchard is committed to doing that, not short-circuiting it by going out and making a trade for Russell Westbrook or something like that. And he feels like Rick Carlisle is the guy to put the Pacers in a situation where late in games, and that's where you win and lose these games, once they get competitive enough to compete to that point late in the game where an out-of-bounds play or a really smart guy with a tactical advantage can employ that advantage, right. That's going to be a meaningful point of differentiation, and that's where they're at.
Well, he's an exceptional coach without a doubt, and obviously he's won a championship with the Mavericks, and he's obviously been a part of a couple of franchises where he had success with the Pistons as well as the Pacers. Let's continue on. This one's probably up Rick Curti's wheelhouse a little bit. He's trying to get Major League Baseball in Charlotte, but I've always wondered about Major League Baseball in Indianapolis. So what are your thoughts about the possibility? Do you think Indianapolis is ever a Major League Baseball town?
They'll never let it happen. The geographic kind of uniqueness of Indianapolis between Detroit, Chicago, St. Louis, and Cincinnati drives us as people in Indianapolis to those four cities to go watch baseball. And to put a team here and all of a sudden we're drawing from Southern Indiana and drawing away from the Reds, Western Indiana drawing away from the Cardinals, the Chicagoland area maybe between Valparaiso and Lafayette coming down here instead of going to Wrigley or instead of going to whatever they call Comiskey Park now. They won't. Reinsdorf and Ricketts and the Illich and the guys, I'm spacing the names in St. Louis, those guys just aren't going to allow it.
So in other words, you're talking about geographically, it's unrealistic. Too many teams in a short ratio. Okay.
And TV. Like they would then black out the Reds, the Cardinals, and the Cubs and the Sox, who are all available here to this marketplace. And that means a lot when you talk about cable rates. And like I pay for the Fox package because I want to get the Pacers and the Cubs. And I wouldn't be able to get it without that. And so that's money out of my pocket to those franchises.
Yeah, I believe the Indianapolis team is affiliated with the Reds. Is that correct?
They are affiliated with the Pirates.
Oh, they are now. Okay.
They have a great attendance. The Indians have great attendance too. They're one of the top drawing MILB teams, along with the Knights. So they totally can support minor league baseball, the minor league team.
Weren't they once affiliated with the Reds?
Victory Field is wonderful, and the people down with the Indians take great care of fans. They make it a terrific experience, and the ballpark's right downtown. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, were they once affiliated with the Reds, I think, or not?
They were, and they were also, like Ken Griffey played here, you know, guys of that, George Foster, guys of that generation. Then it was the Expos. So you had guys like Randy Johnson playing here, Larry Walker played a season here. And then it went back to the Reds, and then all of a sudden it went to the Pirates. And that seemed like it was going to be cool because the Pirates were always drafting early. And you thought, well, we'll see a lot of number 1, number 2 picks through Indianapolis. But they were so bad at drafting, it really didn't matter. And those guys never became a draw anyway.
Well, amazingly enough, we were out in Indianapolis in October, and we ended up downtown. I saw Lucas Oil Field and the stadium are pretty close to each other. And I actually once saw a game over at the RCA Dome too. So, I'm pretty well familiar. What a beautiful area. And I can't wait as the show continues to progress that what I say in all Indiana show, we're definitely going all the way with this, Kent. And we're so thrilled to have you. So with that said, let's talk about the Indiana Hoosiers and your thought of Mike Woodson as a coach. I think that was an excellent hire by the Hoosiers, bringing in Mike Woodson, a guy from the Bobby Knight era where you connect anybody that connected with Bobby Knight. I love Bobby Knight. I don't care what anybody says. And I actually bought his book, Season on the Brink, too. And one of the few books I ever did read, I did read that one. I have a hard attention span, but back then I had a better one to read it. So, but what are your thoughts about the hiring of Mike Woodson for the Indiana Hoosiers?
I like it a lot. If only I agree with you. I think they needed to get back to the Bob Knight roots, and they needed to bring kind of a favorite son back, and they did that. And they really did it in an interesting way because Woodson came in, and then they also brought Dane Fife in. Dane was a senior on that 2002 national championship runner-up team. They brought in Thad Matta as kind of a sort of an ambassador who explained how college basketball worked to Mike Woodson, because Mike Woodson is not necessarily a tremendous detail guy in terms of how the NCAA works, how rules are structured, and, recruiting windows and that kind of stuff. And so Mata was there to kind of ease that transition. He's moved on now to Butler. But they had hired Kelvin Sampson, which was a complete train wreck. And you knew it was going to be a train wreck from the moment I found out that they hired Kelvin Sampson. I thought, my God, what are you people doing? Then he gets fired predictably. They hired Tom Crean, another kind of interloper, another guy from somewhere else. Of course, he was from Marquette and originally a Michigan guy growing up, and a guy from Izzo's staff. He ran his course here. They hire Archie Miller, another guy from the exterior. That didn't work out. It was time to try something new. And this was something new, despite the fact that Mike Woodson's 64 years old. This was a new thing. And if you're going to go back to anybody who is tethered to Bob Knight, you're hiring somebody who is going to be, at least 50 already. The guys who played on the national championship team he coached last in 1987, those guys are now, 57 years old. So you were going to hire an old guy, and I think they hired a good guy. Mike Woodson was a really good coach with Atlanta. They won more every year. He was there 7 years, and the guy just kept piling up wins. He went to the Knicks. Year 1 was really good. Year 2, not so good, as that team kind of fell apart a little bit under the odd ownership of James Dolan. And so you wound up with a guy who knows his way around a chalkboard. You wound up with a guy who is a really good recruiter. He had to recruit you recruit in the NBA. You're recruiting free agents. You're recruiting your own guys you want to retain. Mike Woodson is a really good fit for that position. And in his first year, they go to the NCAA tournament. You've got to see some progression, though, as time moves on. Being a good defensive team isn't going to be enough. You also have to be able to shoot the basketball and create open shots. And the guys that Indiana had last year had some trouble with that.
Well, I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that if you want to be a good recruiter, at least you're going to go play for a coach that's been in the NBA that knows how to get you there. I guess if I want to put one name in the what-if category, I think Steve and Rick could probably attest to this. What if Steve Alford would have been the coach at Indiana? I know if there's an Indiana guy born and bred, Steve Alford was it. So did they ever talk about Steve Alford being the Hoosiers coach at all? I've always wondered about this.
Yeah, there has been a lot of talk about Steve Alford being the coach at Indiana, and the timing just never kind of synced up right.
Right.
When Steve got hot at Southwest Missouri State and then got hired at Iowa, he was good enough at Iowa for the period of time where Indiana was in transition from Knight to Davis to Sampson. And then things went haywire at Iowa as this thing was starting to get rolling. And so he winds up, where'd he go? From Iowa, he went to New Mexico, and things were okay there. And then he goes to UCLA. And so the timing just never synced.
Right.
I don't know what Alford. Dan Dockich is a friend and a media guy, has been on ESPN for a long time, no longer radio guy here, and a good dude. And he is absolutely pot committed that Steve Alford would be terrific at it. But I know that Dan is loyal enough that whether that was true or not, he would say it about Steve.
Steve, Rick, anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, I always wondered why Steve Alford wasn't the coach. I always thought, like, well, there's the perfect guy to fill Bobby's night shoes with Steve Alford. And yeah, he always went to these other colleges. And I thought, I wonder why he never went to Indiana. I always thought he would be a good fit, since he was with Bobby Knight. And I do like Mike Woodson. I think they had to do something. They had to go back to their old roots, because Archie Miller, I didn't see that happening well. Calvin Sampson, Mr. Always gets in trouble with his violations and all that. And that was not a big surprise what happened to him. And so I think Mike Woodson's will do a really good job with the Hoosiers.
One of the things I really love about Indianapolis, and I think we can all appreciate that, is you guys get the Big Ten basketball tournament, and then you get the Big Ten championship game. My goodness, I mean, you talk about a double whammy for revenue. That's an incredible testament to the city that you guys are in, to be able to house not one but two championships.
I'll tell you, about 55 years ago, the city fathers, I guess, the mayor and some other guys got together and said, okay, we need to do something, because the Indy 500 happens once a year and we can't build around this thing. And so what are we going to do? And they decided that they wanted to build the city with the goal of hosting an Olympics. That was the goal. And so they built an arena and they built infrastructure in the downtown area to support a bid for an Olympic Games. And what came of that was the NBA absorbing the ABA, and the Indiana Pacers being part of that absorption, instead of being a team like Louisville or St. Louis that didn't come into the NBA. Indiana did come into the NBA because the Pacers came into the NBA. Bob Irsay moved the Colts from Baltimore to Indianapolis, and then the NCAA moves here, and all of a sudden, all of this really smart thinking back in the mid to late 60s and smart implementation in the 70s and 80s really bore fruit. The NCAA, like I said, moved here. You got Final Fours at least every 5 years. You had a Super Bowl here. This place is built to host those huge events. And for my money, like, New Orleans is really good, but Indianapolis, because of the class is the wrong word, because it sort of, you could convert that to meaning that there's not a lot of class in the volunteerism in other cities, and that's not true. But the volunteers here are really, really friendly. They're great about doing what they do. And the experience for the organizations and for the fans is just wonderful here in Indianapolis. People love coming here for those events, and they should. And it all started 55 years ago with Dick Lugar and a bunch of guys sitting around saying, okay, what do we do?
Yeah, amazingly enough, too, you also had the NFL draft there, too, if I remember right. So
the combine has always been here.
Right. Sure. So I mean, there's no question. You want to talk about a great segue, okay, Kent? You can't get any better than what you just did for me here. The Indianapolis 500. I've been to a couple of them. I went to the qualifying. In fact, I went a whole month. I made the Detroit to Indianapolis commute 4 weeks in a row. They used to have qualifying once and then the practice rounds. I mean, I was so enamored with the whole thing. In fact, trying to get a hotel around there is another story until I got a waiting list. Subsequently worked out. Won't get into that story today. But I've been to a couple of Indianapolis 500s. How many of you attended? Have you been to any Indianapolis 500s?
We moved here in 93. And in that time, so it's at almost 30 years, I've probably been to 24.
24?
I love going. And like poll day, the first day qualifications used to be called poll day. They've kind of reconfigured the qualification protocols, but I love it. It is such a beautiful facility. It is so huge. And on race day, if you ever get a chance to be in turn 1, so you're looking straight down the entire grandstand and you see everybody stand as all the cars come out of turn 4 to take the green flag for that first lap. That is the craziest, most thrilling moment I've ever seen in sports. And like you guys, I've seen everything, but that is just insane to watch. They put about 400,000 people at that facility. The straightaway is a mile long. So you've got a mile long of people all rising as one to cheer the 33 cars coming out of turn 4. It is awesome. I cannot recommend it highly enough. It is a wonderful event, and the people who put it on now, the Holman George family were terrific. Roger Penske now owns the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Doug Bowles, Mark Miles, the entire staff out there, Allison Melanchthon, they are wonderful people, and their wonderfulness really infuses the entire property. It's just a great deal.
Well, the two that I went to, I saw Al Unser win one right when they had that late crash. Was it Emerson Fittipaldi was on that one? And then Jacques Villeneuve, I think, finished second. I think Villeneuve finished, I think he won the following year, if I remember right. But Jacques Villeneuve had a good 2-year run when I was over there. So, yeah, it's unbelievable. Folks, if you ever get out to Indianapolis, Steve, I don't know if you've ever put the Indy 500 on your bucket list. I don't know. I would rather go to an Indianapolis 500 than a Kentucky Derby, because I'd have a hard time going to a place and then watching something for 2 or 3 minutes and it's over with. For the Indianapolis 500, oh my goodness, the campers, and the track and walking around the golf course. It's just.
I think people go to the Kentucky Derby to be seen rather than to see the event.
And the mint juleps there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I think
how
you're
about
right.
this? The other thing I love about the 500 is instead of the Holman George family and the Penskes trying to extract as many dollars out of your wallet as they possibly can by selling you overpriced drinks, you're allowed to bring a cooler in there. And the cooler can be big enough to hold about a case of beer. And so, you're there all day. You bring a sandwich, a case of beer, that's aggressive. But you pack heavy, you can pack heavy and have a hell of a day, and it costs you nothing at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
Well, I think when people bring up names for the whole thing, I've actually done the parade downtown and the Indianapolis 500. So, hey, listen, if I'm going to do it, I'm going all the way. I don't shortchange this thing. But, Jim Neighbors, Gomer Biles, everybody knows. I know back home in Indiana. Don't worry, Ken, I know my stuff. Florence Henderson was downtown. She was awesome. I waved to the woman. She didn't mind waving back to me, even though she knows. Anyways. But, so I guess the $1 million question I have to ask you tonight. Have you ever, my favorite movie of all time is Hoosiers, okay? And I went to the Hoosiers gym, on my honeymoon. And I had to have a great wife who loves sports to be able to pull off going to the Hoosiers gym on your honeymoon. Then again, I have a wife that's one of a kind. I should be a little bit biased anyways. But you ever, where would you classify Hoosiers? Is that one of your favorite movies? And have you ever been to the Hoosiers gym?
I've been there. I took my son shooting buckets there. We used to try to find an open gym so he could get up some shots. He was a good high school basketball player, really good, and then played college basketball at Loyola of Chicago. And so he tried to give him an idea of kind of how high school basketball here worked before he played in it. Angelo Pizzo, the screenwriter, is an acquaintance. He's not a friend, but we'll go out and get a sandwich once in a while. Wonderful guy. My favorite moment being a radio host ever. I've gotten to know a couple of the guys in the movie. Steve Holler, who played Raid, and Ollie, played by a guy named Wade Skank. And so NBA TV was doing a special on Hoosiers. I can't remember what they were here for, but they went to Hinkle Fieldhouse, where a lot of Hoosiers was shot, and had an interview with the team. And so guys on the team said, why don't you come over? We'll do radio after. We can record something. So I sat with Jimmy Chitwood and Ollie and all these guys from this movie. And all I did was start them And then they just started telling stories, and I'm moving the microphone from one guy to one guy. And for an hour, all they did was tell stories about the shoot and about how cool the movie was and how their lives have kind of been infused with some glory because of being in the movie. Just wonderful. And Angelo and David Anspaugh, the director, captured what high school basketball is in Southern Indiana absolutely perfectly.
Well, I'll say one thing.
Unbelievable.
I'll say one thing. My favorite actor of all time is Gene Hackman, and I can tell you right now. Let's see what hand I've been dealt. And when it comes to this basketball team, what I say is the law, absolutely, and without discussion. See, I remember this stuff. Okay, I know how to preach it because I think it a lot, and I think you can talk about all the Rocky movies, all that stuff. I love the Rocky movie. The Hoosiers is number one. And for all you Indiana folks that are listening, I don't care. I probably will only watch it a million times, and I'll watch it a million more times. I always get something and be able to go in that gym. And I plan to go back there again before it's all said and done, especially when I hook up with you at some point down the road. We get a bite to eat there. So,
Angelo, the screenwriter said that Gene Hackman was the black cloud on the set. He would walk up to anybody who would listen saying, "This is going to end our careers." He'd grab Dennis Hopper and say, "Dennis, we're never going to work again after what this thing is."
Wow.
Had no faith whatsoever in the movie, but he's admitted since, like under duress, I think, that it's the movie that he's best known for and best remembered for. And so he has an appreciation for it. But in the moment, he was really not the most pleasant of collaborators in putting that thing together. But I agree with you. I think he captured what being a high school basketball coach is so perfectly.
Well, those lines are what, I can memorize them, put them on a plaque. It don't matter. I think it was pretty interesting when him and Barbara Hershey were actually starting to get along good at the end because they didn't care for each other for a while. But then again, the script writers wrote it so well. So when we talk about the Indianapolis 500, and we mentioned this before, let's go back to when the Pacers were relevant, okay? And we talk about the Indianapolis being the sports capital of the world, when you had the Eastern Conference Finals in successive years with the New York Knicks and the Orlando Magic. What was it like, Kent, okay, for that town? Not only had the Indianapolis 500, but now all of a sudden we know how big basketball is in the state of Indiana, but the Pacers are relevant. They're playing the Knicks and the Magic, and Reggie Miller, to me, will always be number one in my book. I love Reggie Miller, and he seemed like he fit in pretty well with the Indianapolis community. But talk about those respective weekends and back-to-back years where you had the Indianapolis 500 and then you had obviously the Eastern Conference Finals.
That was really the first taste of success here. And I came from Chicago right as that started in 93. And so the Bulls were on their way to their third championship in a row in 93. And so the fans in Chicago had gotten a little bit jaded, and I moved down here, and people really weren't revved into the NBA yet. And then in 94, they really got rolling. The Pacers did, 95, 96. And this town kind of changed, and they really embraced that team. And the NBA was such that at that point that at least with the Pacers, Smits was here his entire career. Dale Davis was here for a decade. Reggie Miller was here for like 18 years. Mark Jackson was here, gone, and then back again. Jalen Rose came, and this is really where he kind of cut his teeth and was given an opportunity, which Larry Bird did. Larry Brown did not care for Jalen Rose at all. And so Larry Bird coming in after Larry Brown moved on was a really good thing for him. That was a team with a collective personality, not guys who were trying to brand themselves and, hey, look at me, but they were like, look at us. They all shaved their heads as kind of a team bonding thing. So people in Indianapolis shaved their heads. And the radio station where I worked, we brought a barber in, and he shaved people's heads. And there was just kind of this euphoria over that team, a really good feel-good story built around a great feel-good team that was team first, did not really, even though Reggie was kind of a star, he was kind of a borderline all-star, now in the Hall of Fame, but everybody gets in the Basketball Hall of Fame. it was a group that played like that. And that's what this community vibes with. When Paul George became kind of a brand, he became PG-13. When he declared himself as PG-13, the entire community turned him out.
Oh, wow.
And they don't do that. We don't play that business here. You don't get over on people by building a brand that's not associated with winning. And that first Pacers team, that team from like 93 until 2000 was really, really special and remained special to a lot of people around here, despite the fact that they never won a championship.
Well, so during those weekends when you had the Indianapolis 500, then you had the respective, the Eastern Conference Championship, not one, but 2 years in a row. And just I was there both years. How cool is that, man? But what was it like to have that many people and consider Indianapolis the actual sports capital, having those many people able to embrace the local team, but you had the Indianapolis 500. It's not like it wasn't eventful to begin with the Indy 500, but then you had the Pacers playing well. That had to be a pretty exciting time for you folks.
Really exciting time. And if then, I know you're talking about like that specific concentrated moment of that weekend, but right. You also had from 98 until 2000, you had kind of the ascent of the Colts. And right. Indianapolis all of a sudden sort of evolving into a football town too, because this is not a football. When I moved here in 93, if you stood up to cheer anything, first down, touchdown, whatever, a sack, whatever, you stood up, you had people behind you telling you to sit down. You had women saying, sit down, I can't see. And that didn't happen at Soldier Field in Chicago, and it doesn't happen in Foxborough. It doesn't happen anywhere else. I thought people had lost their minds, and I'd moved to like the Twilight Zone. But to have that metamorphosis happen simultaneous to the Pacers playing their best basketball was just awesome.
I want to mention a couple of other things about the Pacers. Number one, they're only stories, but they're quick because we got a couple more things I want to get to that are awesome. Okay, so bear with us. Okay, number one, I was interviewing Rick Smits over at the Palace of Auburn Hills, and you know what, Steve and Rick, you can only visualize this. Here, this guy is 7'5". I got my tape recorder right next to me. I felt like I needed a ladder to interview Rick Smits, and I tell you one thing, I swear to God. I'm like 5'11". This guy's 7'5", and I had to put my arm. You want to talk about a stretching exercise interviewing Rick? But Rick was a great guy. Don't get me wrong. It was just so neat to be able to talk about a friendly giant taking an interview and taking it all in stride. That's
I sat across the aisle from Rick Smits on an airplane one time.
Oh yes. Then
Yeah, I was lucky enough to be flying business class where you have a lot of leg room. His right. knees were still way up in his chest.
So then you can appreciate where I'm coming from, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, because I remember while we were flying, I recognized him. I looked over and I was like, how could you not? Okay, because he just from his size. And then, the guy that was sitting beside me said, do you ever have any leg room, wherever you go? And he's like, not too often. That's why I buy 2 seats.
Wow.
Well, interesting. And one other thing I want to mention to you, and I'd like your opinion on this one, Kent. Why Mark Jackson hasn't gotten a second coaching job, to me, is the most puzzling, idiotic thing I've ever seen. Here's a guy that laid out the foundation for the Golden State Warriors. And if anybody should have gotten an opportunity to go ahead and get a second go-around, Mark Jackson belongs. And I had a chance to talk to Mark Jackson the same time with Rick Smits. Mark's one of the finest people you'll ever meet. I don't know. Have you ever had any dealings with Mark at all?
Very little. The guy that my wife works for, a dentist here in Indianapolis, lived next door to him, up in a neighborhood up in Fishers, Indiana, and really enjoyed the whole family. I can't figure it out. There's got to be some level of toxicity that has attached itself to Mark Jackson, and I can't figure out exactly what it is. But I do know that the Lakers are thinking about bringing Mark Jackson in down there, and LeBron is a champion of that. We'll see if that comes to pass, but I definitely think that he should get another shot. I don't understand it at all.
Yeah, you know what? Good point there, Ken. If anybody, I think if the Lakers do come to their senses, I think Mark Jackson's the next coach of the Lakers, and we'll leave it at that. So the one fact that few people don't realize when it comes to Indianapolis, okay. So I always say people are going to learn from something from these broadcasts, and now here's the big part. Wayne Gretzky, okay, remember we talked about this, played for the Indianapolis Racers of the World Hockey Association in 1978. He played there briefly, was traded to the Edmonton Oilers. Gretzky played 8 games with the Racers. Here I am, Racers, Pacers. There you go. That's a tongue twister if I ever saw one. But yet the Racers at the time were losing $40,000 a game. And I know the Racers existed from 74 to 78, and they played at Market Square Arena. I like Market Square Arena, by the way. And then few people realize that Mark Messier played 5 games at 78, 79 for the Racers. So you were telling me when we talked about this. All right, so give me your thoughts about Gretzky and Messier playing for the Indianapolis Racers.
Yeah, and Gretzky went to high school here for a very brief time, but he was still in high school. He enrolled into high school in the area and played for the Racers. And Racers fans, despite the fact that when the WHA went poof, they were gone and, it was over. And I don't even know if they survived to the end of the WHA, but there are still hardcore Racer fans around Indianapolis. This is a good hockey town without a great hockey team. They have the Indy Fuel, which is kind of the AA affiliate for the Blackhawks. Right. But if you talk about a major league something coming to Indianapolis, I think this town could support an NHL team. I think it'd do very well here. The cluster of hardcore hockey fans in Indianapolis is surprisingly deep. And Gretzky, people are very proud to kind of claim Gretzky as sort of a native son of Indianapolis. I don't know if Wayne Gretzky could find Indy on a map, but we still, hey, and Mark Messier, hey, and Whitey Stapleton, hey, we had all those guys for a little bit.
So you guys proud of the fact that Messier and Gretzky started their professional careers there?
I think the minor league franchise, the Indianapolis Ice, which was kind of between the Racers and the Fuel, I think they retired Gretzky's number. I don't know, but
there you go.
And every once in a while they'll have an event like Barry Melrose came in a couple of years ago and was wonderful, and the hockey heritage here in Indy is really, I didn't realize it before I moved, but it's surprisingly deep, and they have a great affection for the WHA and the history of it.
So there you have it, folks. Mark Messier and Wayne Gretzky started their professional careers in Indianapolis, and the people in Indianapolis, led by Kent Sterling, they take a lot of pride in it. So since you've been able to take my best shots right now, Mr. Sterling, okay, I want everybody out here to give them an overview of your platform and your years in the media. I usually like to do this beginning, but I knew that we were going to have a lot of fun with the Colts and the Patriots. So I wanted to save this to the very end and let everybody go ahead. The floor is yours. Let everybody know about your platform, your years in the media, and so they can all track in, and we'll get into a few more things before we wrap it up. Go ahead.
I have always been in radio management. And so worked at WGN in Chicago, WMAQ in Chicago, moved down here to WIBC, and we launched 1070 The Fan, the first really true sports talk radio station in Indy. And I was the program director and hired Eddie White, Bob Kravitz, Dan Dockich, Michael Grady, who's with the Yes Network, and loved it. And my boss died, so I took a job in St. Louis and programmed 101 ESPN there, had a great time, came back here. And we've all seen how media works and how it's kind of shrinking, and that you really need to be pretty versatile. In baseball terms, you need to play all 9 positions. And I had never been a host. So I kind of talked my way onto a radio station here, CBS Sports 1430. I said, I'll program it and I'll hire me as a guy who can host live and local, and didn't tell them that I didn't know what I was doing as a host. Did that for 5 years. The station got sold. The signal is more or less destitute, sadly. but that's what happens with AM radio in a market like Indianapolis. And so I turned to social media, which had always kind of been a hobby, but started a YouTube channel. Knew from being a program director of Sports Talk what people want to listen to, and it's the Colts and the Hoosiers. And that's above the line, and everything else is below the line, and the Pacers below the line. When I do a YouTube video, and I do 2 a day, I do Breakfast with Kent, and I do Inside Indiana Sports Now, people, they'll listen to the Colts, they'll come for the Colts, they'll listen for the Hoosiers. You start talking about the Pacers, things start to wane a little bit. And that's a shame, and I think that that's going to change. But I know strategically how to do it, and I thought if I could polish my performance to the point where I was listenable, I could use the knowledge I've got in building a decent show into hosting something that's of value on YouTube, on my own channel, Kent Sterling, at kentsterling.com, because I love to write too, so I write. I wrote a book about all of this called Oops, The Art of Learning from Mistakes and Adventures, which is all the mistakes that many of the mistakes I've made, not all of them, but it's a book of mistakes, and a lot of them are media related. And so, I feel like I have a story to tell. I have a perspective on sports that's fueled by a kind of a working knowledge of management. And I think that makes it unique. And I just love doing it. You know what? You get up in the morning, you figure out what you're going to talk about for 15 minutes, you turn on the machine, off you go. And, after 15 minutes, if you performed well, the product stands on its own. And if you didn't, you know what? You learn from it and you do it better in the afternoon. And so, being diligent, having a good attitude, having connections in Indianapolis, I'm pretty well ensconced here with like the Colts, with the Pacers, with the Hoosiers, Butler, with Purdue, so that the track, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So if I need credentials or I want to talk to somebody, people are very generous about that. So I have access that a lot of people don't have. And it's just a joy. It's what I try to do every day, and this sounds so self-serving and I apologize for it, is bring some kind of enthusiasm that maybe is contagious enough to cause others to be a little bit enthusiastic and bring more energy in their lives and understand that they can control their own energy. And that's what I try to do. And if that is communicated to a small portion of people, you know what, then I win.
Well, there's nothing. I have no problem with it. What are you talking about? What do you think I'm doing here? Everything that we have, by the way, just so you know, folks, I want to give everybody an idea how you get these broadcasts. You can hear them on Spreaker, Spotify, Apple, Google, iHeartRadio. And yes, Kent, I have a YouTube channel, and I hope you'll subscribe to mine. I'll make a deal. Subscribe to mine. I'll subscribe to yours. And you can also find a broadcast on www.southfloridatribune.com, which is where we launch everything as well. But no, there's nothing self-serving about it. You got a guy named Pat McAfee in your backyard who's having a field day with all this internet stuff. I mean, my God, he's almost become a folk hero, and he really put himself on the map when he was able to go ahead and interview Aaron Rodgers and let Aaron go out there and be the next Kenny Mayne. So I'm with you. Hey, listen, you have to have passion and energy in this business, or you're not going to make it anyways. Because let me tell you, I've been in this business for 42 years. My first job was working for WXYZ Radio, which is ABC in Detroit. And one thing led to another, where you're behind the scenes, you work your way to get on the air. I'm trying to groom Rick Curti a little bit to become more of a broadcasting guy. Steve's an old pro. What do you want? He's on 9 million podcasts all over the place, and he's good at every one of them. But the thing that I've tried to do myself is I know what it's like to be behind the scenes and then front and center behind the microphone. And obviously we want to make sure that nowadays you have a different era where you're obviously marketing it. So you're right. You have to wear a lot of million hats to get your name out there in an effort to be relevant in this day and age, because it's not like in the old days when I got into business here, where you were privileged to be in it, ABC, CBS, and NBC and then whatever. Now, obviously, anybody can get in it. The question is, do they have the perseverance to stay in it? And I think that's one thing that people have to really recognize. So, no, I mean, it's really refreshing to be able to bring a fellow media colleague on here. Steve's obviously a media colleague. He sees it from a different perspective, right? Steve, when you be able to cover the Patriots, and you can't tell you how many great broadcasters and sportscasters you met out in Boston, right, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, you meet people all the time, and it's always a joy meeting different people because you get a different perspective, and by and large, the media people that you come across, in the sports world are 99.9%, I think, great people. And because it's a passion. And when you're around people that have that passion, it's just contagious. It's fun. And, that's why we got into this. So, it's a lot different for me in my other line of work. We're covering, military and politics. That's kind of a different atmosphere when you're around that.
Well, what's interesting about Rick Curti, and I could speak for him, is he approached me a long time ago, Kent, about promoting baseball in Charlotte. Little did this guy realize that I'm trying to turn him into a sportscaster, okay? and he's learning and blending in well, and he's doing real well. Steve's been in, and I've been in. I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but when I bring a guy like you on, Kent, who's a fellow broadcaster, what I'm really literally doing is I'm bringing a contemporary on here. So if our shows tend to get a little bit longer than most, well, what do you want? Name me a silent journalist that ever made it anyways. And I don't think I'm smart enough to go ahead and do that. No, they call me Scott Morganroth, not Albert Einstein. So go figure that. But at any rate, but the whole idea is this. We're so glad, Kent, that you took some time of your evening to join us tonight. And, this is an Indianapolis show, but it's more than an Indianapolis show. It's an intro perspective about bigger events. We've talked about movies. We've talked about a great city, probably one of the best kept secrets in the country citywide. And people that I've been around have been treating me really well. And it's just so great to finally have an opportunity to go ahead and bring you on this program. And I hope that you and I will continue to work in collaboration together as well. So
I appreciate it. And great to meet you, Rick and Steve.
You too.
Thanks for having me, Scott. I couldn't be more appreciative. It's a lot of fun.
So, all right. So with that said, Ken, why don't you let everybody know exactly how they can get a hold of you?
Oh, just go to kentsterling.com. That's easy. Or go to YouTube and search Kent Sterling. And you know what? If you don't mind me coming into your home twice a day talking about sports, I'm a perfect companion.
There you go. All right, Rick Curti, you know the drill. To let everyone know they get a hold of you.
You can find me on my website, www.charlottebats.com. I'm also on Facebook at Charlotte MLB. I'm also on there, Charlotte Bats Baseball. I'm on Instagram at Charlotte Bats. I'm on Twitter at Charlotte Bats Baseball. And you can find me on LinkedIn under Rick Curti, and my email address is cltbatsbaseball@gmail.com.
All right, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at SteveB7SFG. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Steve Balestrieri. I write for PatsFans.com as well as a national security columnist for 1945.com.
Very good. And I'll let everybody know my info again. As I mentioned moments ago, you can find the shows on Spreaker, Spotify, Apple, Google, iHeartRadio, wherever you get your podcasts. You can also please subscribe to our YouTube channel, South Florida Tribune. We would greatly appreciate all the subscribers that we can get, not only from you, but everybody else, because like you're doing, we're trying to build a platform as well. Our show, you can also find us on www.southfloridatribune.com. I'm on Twitter at Tribune South. It's at Tribune South. You can locate me on LinkedIn under my name, Scott Morganroth, as well. And of course, you can email us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. Kent, any closing thoughts before we call it a night?
No, just a lot of fun. You guys are great. Very, very pleasant way to spend an evening.
Well, you know what? We really enjoyed having you, and hopefully, if you're ever interested in coming on down the road, we'd certainly love to bring it back to you. I'm sure that we got a lot out of our system here, so we can narrow it down just a little bit. But geez, I mean, when I tell people down the road, this is all Indiana sports, if they don't believe me, shame, 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 as Gomer Pyle or Jim Neighbors would say. And I had to go ahead and throw a Jim Neighbors thing at the very
It's the
end.
hometown, my favorite actor, James Dean, from Fairmont, Indiana, as well.
True.
There you go. So meanwhile, folks, on behalf of Rick Curti, Steve Balestrieri, Kent Sterling, my name is Scott Morgan, we're out the Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the Sports Exchange, and we hope everybody has a pleasant weekend. Thank you very much, and we'll see you the next time. God bless, folks.
Good night.